Susan Gardner here for Municipal World. We are at the OMAA Fall Workshop in beautiful Muskoka, Ontario. And joining me in the Municipal World Media Center is Sandra Pupatello. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Susan.
Glad to have you here. You gave a great keynote this morning for municipal CAOs, and I think some things for them to ponder now as they contemplate the new councils that they're going to be working with for the next 4 years. And I wonder if you could maybe share some of those insights. I think there were some things that you suggested. Political acuity has been something that we've talked about this week at OMAA.
And I find with CAOs and that level that we get that they're nonpartisan, but that doesn't mean that they can't be political, because it is a matter of thinking and a matter of understanding what their role is. I want to say they're like the mayor whisperer. Let's call them that. They see and know things that predate this mayor in most cases. There's an institutional memory that they know, oh my goodness, the last guy tried this and this was the disaster that happened. So it really is their job to be informative. Ultimately, we understand that the political leadership will make ultimately the decisions. CAO's role makes sure that they do that with their eyes wide open. They see the downfall, they see the opportunity of every step that council decides to take. And they know that because they've done the homework, they've done the research, and they have institutional memory because they've seen this movie before. And you know how you see there's really no new ideas, it's happened somewhere. So it is that role to be small p political and understand what relationships need to be built back up because the election may have damaged some, or you know, if the mayor and council are sort of known to be of a political party that isn't the governing party provincially or federally, then you've got to find other ways to make those connections with those levels, because in Ontario, your municipality exists by virtue of what the province decides. That's just the way it is. Right. So you need those people as your partners.
You kind of suggested some ways to, in terms of intergovernmental relations, kind of reading between the lines as to what's happening federally in terms of policy, what's happening provincially, and ways for municipalities, for CAOs to help their councils navigate those waters and achieve some things for their communities.
Probably in summary, I was giving them a list, which I know is now available, the OMMA. I just handed them, this is what I think the list should include. And it was a number of items that are part of the onboarding process for new mayors and councillors. It is a unique opportunity at the beginning of every term to say to all of them, these are the rules. And you say it in a forum that everybody hears. They all hear it together, so they all know this is what we know is appropriate behavior at council. This is what we know the rules say happens when this kind of behavior exists. So somebody's got to set those ground rules, and it's just easy when it comes from the CAO. And it's easy when it comes at the front end, because it is very, very awkward when somebody has to deal with it on a one-to-one basis when there's trouble. So better get it on the table early and say those uncomfortable things. Rules have changed in the workplace, and that includes how mayor and council interacts with staff that work at City Hall or Town Hall. And if you don't come from the HR world, you just don't know those rules. And likewise, financials. I always marvel that there's an expectation that just because people got elected, they suddenly are experts on how to read a financial statement. Well, if that's not your world, how would you know? That's right. So you suddenly get inundated by this financial information, and nobody wants to say out loud, gee, I don't understand this. Well, I don't get how this works. So at the very front end, do that as part of onboarding to say, here's how we present financial information. Simply, here's where the money comes from, here's where the money goes as it stands today. Because obviously they're in charge of how that's going to change in the future. Yeah. But some basic things about, you know, how human nature, we don't want to say we don't know. So let the CAO share with everybody this process, and you will be amazed at how much learning happens when you do it in that very sort of collegial way to say, you probably use financial statements that look completely different. And I will say that they're very different in a private sector than they are in public. And I certainly learned that. but you have to be educated to know. And, you
and
know,
you're better to have that education early on in the process.
Very early. You know, we talked about what plans have been on the go for the last 10 or 20 years, that this is what happens and here's what councils of the past have agreed to do, that by the year 2050 we would have achieved X. So tell them up front that these were baked in plans. So if they're going to upset that apple cart, at least they're going in with their eyes wide open, right? And not to put the salve on some, you know, political slogan that they decided to run on that actually was pretty ridiculous. But then the contrast is true. It's an opportunity for the CAO to learn and the staff. What is the high point for these people? Why did they run for elected office? What was the feature for them that said, I'm going to run? Is it because more parks? Maybe they want dog parks. Maybe they want cycling lane. Whatever those things were, it's better that you know, so you can reach out to them and say, hey, why don't we get the international of the blah, 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 and get them into this town to show us how we can get there. And you start reaching out and doing that kind of relationship building, everybody's going to be happy. The councillors and the mayor who want to achieve what they set out to do, and you help them along that journey. And for you, you know, the baseline is you've got to run your ship.
Yes.
That goes without saying. So it's the extra, because everybody assumes you're running the ship. It's what else are you doing to keep your council and your mayor happy and achieving those high points that they've set out for that term.
So help them achieve their goals, support them, and find ways that you can connect them to other orders of government, other organizations that
and when they realize that the staff, they're not the enemy, they're actually the helpmate. And when you establish that relationship very early on, I don't know of a relationship where that didn't work.
Yeah.
When those CAOs understood their place and understood how they could help make this happen. So maybe the mayor whisperer or the council whisperer is sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I had started with a definition on the board that just said CAO, you know, definition, mentor, leader, motivator, but also the one who makes it happen gets no credit.
Yes.
And they have to be okay with that.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
Yeah.
The other thing that you talked about was getting more women involved in leadership, and you suggested some strategies for that. We know that women are, you know, really underrepresented politically and administratively in leadership positions in government across Canada. Why do you think we have challenges?
Well, I don't want to be blasé about it, because there are a lot of things that matter more for women as they're going through their career. And I will say that it is the same kind of issue that bedevils women in many other careers, not just in the public sector. But the rules around work have to be a little bit more expansive to accommodate stages of a woman's life more so than a man's. It's just the way it is. And until parenting really is 50-50, that will always be the case, right? There should be more participation at a local level, because women get to go home in the same bed in the same house every night, which is the problem at provincial and federal levels, because you've constantly got to travel to work and be gone all week. It makes it a challenge, you know, when you're in a certain stage of life. But ultimately, for whatever reason, and there are lots of reasons and lots of research, and I spent many years leading the Women's Directorate for the Government of Ontario and learning about this, women have to be asked. They don't naturally come by the way of the view, I can do that job. I think they should ask me that. So it's all of our responsibility to point that out. Yeah. To say, you know, I can see that you're really good at that, and I think you ought to be considering doing this. Amazingly, women don't get asked, they don't consider it for themselves, and they will remain at a certain level. And then it sort of compounds itself. Well, I've been here for 20 years, so clearly no one thought that I could do that, and it sort of continues as a cycle. That's our job to break that. It's our job to say, you know what, there are lots of opportunities. I need you to think about that. So when today I spoke about a plan, actually having an active plan, make the women get together to talk about this, because out of that will come, at least for that period of time, maybe it's just a half an hour a week, for that one moment, they're going to say, who have we talked to this week? Who did we advance this week? Who have I brought with me to that meeting so that they could see how I behave when I'm having to address council? Those types of things. put them right in there. And when you make an active plan, amazingly, it happens.
So is this a strategy you think that could be applied not just organizationally within your organization, but within the profession to find ways
for sure.
To do this?
Just like here at OMAA, you can see that the CAOs are bringing people that they believe would either aspire or should be aspiring to that role of CAO, so that they can see how do people in this realm behave, what are they learning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Same thing for women. Again, amazingly, and I'm included in that group, I never would have run for public office if someone hadn't called me and actually asked, I think you should run. That was the phone call. And I thought, I'd been involved in politics since I was 14 years old. It never occurred to me that I would be the one, seeking the nomination. And that's astounding for people to hear, because they think, of course she went ahead and did it. But I actually was called and wouldn't have
Changed
considered
your
it.
life.
Yes, and this week, the Nobel Prize winner out of Waterloo, who was an associate professor. Why wasn't she a full professor? Didn't know the news story. She didn't ask. So, it is what it is,
yeah.
And we can change that.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Sometimes we think when it's time, we'll be asked. Somebody's going to notice and we'll be asked.
I think we have a sense of fairness that way, that, well, surely people will see, I can do this. I'm thinking, yeah, and they think they can too,
Exactly
so there's,
right.
we have to change, so the people around us can help motivate us.
So
and
you suggested some starting steps inside your organization if you want to, improve the, sense of balance, gender parity.
For sure.
Where do you start?
Well, I think you have to make sure everybody understands what the plan is, not just the women. And I say that because you don't want a backlash, which has happened historically in Ontario when governments have decided to implement quotas. There's always been that sense of unfairness with that.
Yeah.
So you need everyone to know this is why we're doing it, this is what the plan is, and this is how you need to help us with this plan. So everybody then participates in motivating and moving women into a position where they actually think that they can do more. If you don't have a big pool of people to choose from that are also women, how are you ever going to elevate them? So you've got to build the pool. And that really does start at a much lower level within the organization than just the top. I mean, tomorrow you're not going to have half of the women become CAOs. They need to at least be in the pool.
That's right.
So you've got to start somewhere. And I'm suggesting that we start a lot sooner than we've been, which is entry-level positions, and make the women get together to talk about where do they aspire to be in 5 years? Where do they think they can go in 2? And what do they need to do today as a new entrant in this world to eventually get there? More courses at school, more mentoring opportunities, traveling with their boss to different places, bringing up new ideas, being in charge of special projects as they come along, so they sort of build the confidence that they can do this. And then, you know what, it just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Those are great insights. Thank you so much for joining us here. I really appreciate it. It was nice chatting with you.
Yeah, and you too. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Susan Gardner for Municipal World. We share your stories.